I reached out to the family of the man who was shot. I went to their home, sat in their living room, and told them of my decision and the rationale behind it. I wanted them to be the first to hear it, and I wanted them to hear it directly from me. Recently, I had been invited to present at an upcoming national conference to talk about this approach as a model for the country. And Michelle, one of your event organizers, asked me to mention this to you. I know that today's summit will focus on court issues highlighted in the Department of Justice Ferguson reports, which has not gotten as much attention as the police and the prosecutors. But I want to applaud you for taking your time to gather today to focus on this important subject and being proactive towards improving our justice system.
Good morning to all of you. I'm glad to be with you today as we're gathered here on this, the 15th of December, our National Day of Celebration of the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights is an extraordinary document. It's the first 10 amendments to our Constitution. It guarantees our freedom of speech, religion, press, right of assembly and petition, trial by jury, the right to be secure in one's home, the protection of due process, and much more that we could easily take for granted. It is important that we take time to pause and reflect on these rights. The United States Department of Justice's recent report on the system of justice in Ferguson, Missouri has an extensive list of recommendations for improving justice that are relevant to our courts. Some of the recommendations speak to more open proceedings, bail and bonds, more separation of the executive and judicial branches in both reality and even in appearance. Today is a good day to reflect together on that report. I also encourage you to reread our Bill of Rights. A copy is included in your materials. With it, our forefathers put forth a vision of justice, which they designed to outlive themselves. To me, it is an inspiring document of hope and of faith.
As president of our Council of Municipal Court Judges, I can state with certainty that for most Georgians, their only contact with the judicial system is in either a municipal or a magistrate court, the people's courts. If we can make these appearances meaningful, we will be serving our citizens well. So here's my solution, and it costs $6.98 plus tax. You're all a bunch of SOBs. Sign, own, bond. When I get a warrant for a traffic case, I take out this stamp and just stamp on it. Sign, own, bond. So when a defendant gets arrested for one of these FTA minor traffic offenses, they don't have to call mama, they don't have to call a friend. They just go to the head of the line in the jail, sign their own bond, and they're usually in court the next day anyway.
And for that reason, I was always a big advocate of getting that information out, and it included cameras in the courtrooms, as long as that could be managed. Because a courtroom does need to be managed. I actually did go out to the O.J. Simpson trial for a couple of days while I was on the Georgia Supreme Court, and it was an absolute service. I mean, it was a zoo.
I'm of the opinion that we should be transparent, that we should allow cameras in the courtroom. My biggest angst, and I guess we'll talk about that later, is I'd like to know. So if there's someone who's going to be recording, I think it's permissible, and I think we should know that that's happening.
I had a camera on the judge, and it would cut down on some of my jokes, I think. saying something stupid.
I think it's really great in Georgia. The law is very strong. The presumption is in favor of openness. And so we have Rule 22, which means you have one single camera, and it stays at the back of the courtroom, and it's not distracting, and it feeds out. We even have a protocol for high-profile cases.
In 2011, after the governor was elected in 2012, I want to give you some statistics. Really the impetus, if you will, for why Georgia embarked on this now 5-year streak of working on criminal justice reform policies. Between 1990 and 2011, Georgia's prison population doubled to.
And I was shocked. As a member of the judicial community at the time, I couldn't believe what I read in the Department of Justice's report. I'm going to share the overview of that report with you and talk about a couple of key components. I'd like to pick up where we were, because obviously we've hit a tension here, in a good one, a one that is very important to the administration of justice in our courts and to our adversarial system. And I love good discussion like this.
What do we need to do to make the situation not happen again? So any first-time defendant, any prosecutor worth their salt is going to be looking for ways to help them address the underlying issue and have an opportunity to have that speed reduced, to get that shoplifting with your best bud at the mall when you were 17 taken off of your criminal history. That's what we do as prosecutors, and especially as misdemeanor prosecutors. So please don't think when I say, I do have a duty to try to help people. We're misdemeanor prosecutors. That's different than people who are, I'm not sending people away for 20 years. I'm dealing with real life, and let me tell you how many friends I have prosecuted over the years.
One of my jobs is helping develop training for elected officials on legal matters. So we present training to the city councils, to the mayors, about what municipal courts are, what their obligations are, and we've completely overhauled the training to be post-Ferguson, and our first launching of that is at Mayor's Day.
And here's what happened to him when he went to the city court. He was given a fine of $500, but because he couldn't afford to pay the fine on the day of court, he was placed on probation for 12 months with a private probation company.
Highly suggest, particularly judges, to go take a look at that, because it's an anecdotally based report, so there's so many stories. But the thing about those stories is they are so similar to the things that many of us see in municipal courts. And so you can make the analogy and say, I've got to figure out a way to prevent this from happening if I'm seeing it happening in my court. But
I'm conservative in this. I think the government shouldn't do everything, but the things the government should do or must do, it should do well. And if you have a city or municipality that's so small it can't deliver the fundamentals of justice, then that's a municipality that may not need to exist.
The old man says, I thought that I had died and gone to heaven. But I tear every time I think about it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sorry. Yes, sir.
Is he supposed to stand?
A couple of things, I think. Judge Boggs mentioned when he was, Justice Boggs, excuse me, mentioned in his presentation in response to the question, what's going on with decriminalization of traffic offenses? This is something that the state has taken a look at for the last several years. Georgia is one of 22 states that criminalizes every traffic offense, which puts people in the system who don't need to be there. The idea around probation or criminal behavior is supposed to be about harm to communities and making sure that there is a criminal remedy. Then things like burning leaves, as my colleague mentioned in the last panel, or driving with a dirty license plate, or driving a few miles over the speed limit, all of which some of us in this room have been accused of doing, either through citation or we're lucky enough to not be caught doing. But definitely not criminal behavior. And when we can go into court or pay our fine online and get rid of it, snip, snap. We don't really realize the ramifications of people who cannot afford those fines and fees. And so thinking again about removing people from the criminal justice system by just deciding that certain behaviors should not be criminal. By the time the judge is presiding over the case, the disparities are already baked in, right? And I know the Ferguson report spends a great deal of time talking about arrest and policing practices that should be revised. But we know that people of color and people who are in poverty are more likely to be stopped, more likely to be in the system. So by the time the judge is dealing with a caseload of, of which 85 to 90% of the people are not going to be able to pay the fines and fees, it becomes something that we should think about in a more comprehensive way. And I know, again, that the focus of this event is on judicial practices, but I think just a recognition that we're talking about a system that by the time we're talking about disposition, there's already been many instances of disparities that have already happened.
Well, first of all, I'll tell you, I'm in municipal court. And like Rebecca, who's in a court that handles smaller cases, we are constantly reminded of how much money we are taking in and how much money we are not taking in. Who's making the cases and sending them to us, and as I frequently tell the people on our commission, we handle every case that comes to us. It doesn't make any difference whether the state patrol makes the case, or the county makes the case, or who makes the case. That's really who controls how many cases come to us. That being said, law enforcement is not a money-making venture. Should never have been looked at that way. And once you get above the level of the state courts and the municipal courts, nobody thinks of it that way. They're expected to raise money. You have to, as a judge, educate your county commissioners, your city council, or whoever is making those decisions. You have to sit down with them. You have to explain that to them. And what I have found, and I'm real fortunate, is that most of the people on our commission go along with it. Now, there's no doubt they would like to have $2 or $3 million more coming out of my court. They would love that because they love spending everybody else's money. But I think that if you sit down and talk to them, they will understand. I'm a full-time judge. We have several judges that fill in for me in times when I can't be there. At one time, Macon-Bibb County has gone through a lot of changes. But at one time, we had 4 or 5 judges who rotated on the bench. And I might have it one week, another judge may have it the next week, another judge may have it the next week. It was good in one sense because you couldn't judge shop real easy. But in another sense, we were not always on the same page. And what we found the thing for us to do, all us being, as you said, educated adults, although sometimes we may not have acted quite like it, we would actually have meetings where we would sit down and I might say, Judge Smith, I noticed that you do so-and-so, and I've never done it that way. So what's your idea behind doing that? And sometimes they could explain it, and I may change my way of doing things. And sometimes, maybe not, and they may change their way of doing things. And the other judges would jump in, and they would give their ideas. I found, again, I'm big on communication. You may have noticed that because I say it all the time. That by communicating with each other, we were able to hash those issues out so that we did have, you knew what was going to happen when you went in the courtroom up to an extent. Now,
when I do my sentencing, I don't worry about whether revenue is an issue or not. However, today I've learned a lot, and I'm so glad I came today because, as a judge, you walk into a culture, whatever that culture is, in your line of work. And for me, it usually happens like this. We're in a plea, and the prosecutor and the defense attorney announce that they have come to an agreement, and that agreement includes a fine of X amount of dollars. And it's not like I don't know to think any differently. It's just that the culture is you accept it and you go on. And so, you know, having heard the things that I've heard today, it has really, you know, made me, because when I do it, I don't think about revenue, but at the same time, I'm doing just that without consciously doing it. So I'm really glad that you guys are speaking about this. The culture that we work in, it kind of perpetuate, you know, what we do. And so how people perceive as something that's been consistent or not has a lot to do with how they trust or distrust our court system. So for example, I start my court right on the dot at 9 o'clock every time. And if I don't, I apologize, you know, to the people and I explain to them why I was late. And when I give out my sentences, I try very hard to be very consistent about what I do. Of course, you know, there's always discretion, and there are always lawyers who are better, do a better job and can get better deals, or a defendant who cooperates with law enforcement is offered a better deal. But other than things like that, if people perceive and see that a judge is, you know, giving different people, depending on who they are, in front of them different sentences, you know, obviously that's going to make them distrust of what we do. And so I really think that a judge, you see so many people, and you're the person that could really influence a lot of people by what you do.
Nothing that stops a well-intentioned judge from working with people to keep from having the kinds of problems that we're talking about. I hate to see folks pay fines and leave court feeling like the system has betrayed them because the process was the punishment. But I want to go back to the point that Attorney Johnson mentioned in their panel here earlier about going to courts where people are being denied access to the courts and other issues. And he made a comment, it wasn't original with him, but it's a good comment and it's worth sharing, that sunshine is the best remedy when you've got problems like this. The only reason that problem courts like that continue to exist is because people don't speak up about it. Right. If you know, I would love to see a program of interested organizations like the NAACP, like AKA, like the Southern Center, others who are interested in seeing courts that operate as agencies of justice, that uphold people's rights the way they're supposed to. That's why I got my degree. I really appreciate what the judge said earlier and what you said, Judge Deere, about I didn't get my degree and I didn't become a judge to be a revenue collector for the state of the county. I got that degree so I could help people get justice. And that's what we all ought to be about. And it offends me greatly to know that there are courts out there that are trotting people's rights. And the only way to deal with that is that there is an organized effort to stamp it out.
Thank you for your interest. You are here because you care in the state of our courts and in the state of our state. And for that, I hope that you will take this as teachable moments, that you will educate everyone that you know, and that you will be committed to the process and making these changes.